Welcome to the Triple D Podcast, Donuts, Disability, and Discourse, where host Michael Liner talks to the best in the business about community, impact, business, and donuts. Here's your host, Michael Liner.
Welcome to an extra special episode of the Triple D Podcast. I am very excited to, let's be transparent here. We look like we're in different parts of the country, Alex Lawson, but I'm actually 2 offices down from you. I'm here at your office in Washington, D.C., inside of the AFL-CIO headquarters. I know to use that full acronym now. Alex Lawson is the executive director of Social Security Works, which is an awesome organization that we're going to learn a lot about through our conversation today. Alex, let me just ask you a direct question and we'll spin off from there. Tell me about Social Security Works. What do you guys do?
So we fight to protect and expand Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid to lower prescription drug prices. All of that is in line with the original intent of the Social Security Act signed into law by FDR, the brain child of Francis Perkins, who is, sort of the creator of what is known as the New Deal. And it's a collection of policies. The Social Security Act is maybe the best known, but the vision was really clear. It's an ever-expanding system of economic security for everyone in this country. So they knew that it wasn't sufficient when it started. FDR said, with this act, as he signed it, I'm laying the cornerstone to be built on. And they knew what they wanted, right? So like the addition of disability in the wage insurance package, which happens much later. But that's the vision is this expanding system, because it's important to, I think, some of the conversations we're going to have too. At the time, you're in the midst of the Great Depression, right? This Wall Street caused economic collapse, the severity of which had never been seen before in the world. And the New Deal is created to alleviate that acute problem, right? Like this unemployment rate that's just astronomical, 50% of workers unemployed. But it also is to prevent that crisis from happening again. And that's why the system has to not just be protected, but expanded. That's part of the system. So that's our mission, is to really try to make Francis Perkins smile on us by, for example, in the original act, there was guaranteed health care for every person in this country. Because how can you be economically secure if you're one illness or injury away from bankruptcy? So that's our vision and what drives us.
Something that I hate how this gets used as a scare tactic in the media a lot is there's all kinds of chatter about the insolvency of the Social Security Trust, and they've got different burn rates. They've got different dates that they're expected to not be able to pay full benefits, but the Social Security Retirement Trust and the Disability Trust. What is Social Security Works' position on how to shore things up? What do you advocate for when people start talking about, the insolvency of the program?
So I think you were quite careful in the way you said it, maybe at the end, a little bit of uncarefulness eased in, but the real problem is that most people aren't careful. And by most people, I mean, billionaire-owned politicians and media, because they don't talk about it. You said insolvency and the trust, you left off fun. Most of the time what people hear is Social Security is going bankrupt.
Right?
Go ask people what that means. Those words, Social Security is going bankrupt, and they'll tell you that what it means is Social Security goes to zero. So right now, the average benefit is $1,900 a month across all, right? So including people with disabilities, disabled Americans, and seniors. Very different when you look into the two, but I don't go too far in the weeds on this. That's not going to happen. The bankrupt Social Security goes to zero. Impossible. It's impossible. As long as the United States exists and there are workers paying into the system, there will be a Social Security system. Checks will come out. Now, what can happen, and it's designed this way, is each generation sort of pays in and builds up a surplus in a trust fund and then spends that down over the life of the generation. And this is important. It answers everything. So bear with me because I will get there. What happened is that in 1983 is the last time that these reforms happened. And the baby boom generation has been paying in to build up this trust fund. And to do that, their benefits, our benefits as well, were cut. The retirement age was raised from 65 to 67. That's a 14% benefit cut for everyone. And then there were some revenue increases as well. And they did it on both sides. And that was supposed to last till 2065. 2065 is when the baby boom generation will have exhausted its life. It means that the majority of the generation will have died. And then the largest generation, which is the millennial generation, will be in the midst of their relying on Social Security. This is by design. There's a handoff between generations. But what's happened is, for some reason, and I know the reason, but this answers it. For some reason, instead of 2065, the trust fund right now, if nothing is done, is exhausted in 2035.
Right.
It's only treated, you treat both trust funds as one, they operate as one, right? So disability was going to go bankrupt like last year, and so you just rebalance between the two. Congress could mess it up. They always can. But generally, just think of it as one. There's one exhaustion date that matters, 2035. And that's if Congress does nothing. So there's two questions here. What happens in 2035? What happens is not that your benefits go away. It's that automatically benefits match the money coming in, which means everyone gets a 17% benefit cut. Every single person gets 17% cut from their benefit the moment the trust fund is out of money. And that is devastating. But it's also not going to zero, right? So now we've identified the problem, a 17% benefit cut in 2035. There's one other thing that I'll give you to get to solution, unless you want to.
I want to cut in and ask you a question, because there's something you said that's interesting. So when I put things out there about, the depletion of the fund, of the trust, a lot of times people will say to me, that's our money. We paid in, we worked for it. What I'm hearing you say is, no, it's not. That's what the last generation before you paid in. What you're paying in is only that 83% that's where that 17% is going to go. That's what's going to disappear. Am I wrong in hearing it that way?
I mean, money is fungible, so I think you're more wrong than right there. The people who are saying, hey, that's our money, they're
I'm usually all the way wrong. So if I've got a little bit right, I'm improving over
You're right in that there's this handoff between generations. That's what's beautiful. That's what Francis Perkins was like. You know what we can do as a country with social insurance is, as long as we believe in the future, as long as we aren't nihilists who believe that the only thing that matters is, my own self. And when I die, it's all gone. As long as we understand we're in community, then we can do things intergenerationally. They used to build cathedrals like this. We've built a social insurance system this way, and it's a beautiful thing. So it is our money, and they can't steal our money. At the same time, where you're right is it's currently funded. So the money that's going into Social Security is money that's being paid in right now. So it is our money, including what went into the trust fund. Now there's an outflow. So like you could probably calculate, much younger people maybe have never paid in to that trust fund, but that would be going really deep on that. Here's the important thing. The question that you should ask is, who stole that 30 years, right? Why did it go from 2065 to 2035? So first off, Social Security is not going bankrupt. The problem is that we have a decade to figure out how to prevent a 17% benefit cut from everyone, right? So first, you have to figure out, why did it happen? And the right wing, the billionaires, Wall Street, they have this story that they tell, and don't trust me on this. Google it. Look at the Social Security actuaries. Read their PowerPoints that they put out. It's really easy. You go to Social Security, SSA.gov, type in, well, it's easy unless, the Trump administration decides to take all of this down. But this, you don't have to trust me. The actuaries have looked at it. Is it because, immigrants are taking our benefits? Because that's what Trump has been selling. No, it's absolutely not that. Because in fact, immigrants can't get benefits.
Right. So they're actually paying in and not receiving. So they're helping. They're helping.
It's the opposite. They pay in and don't get benefits. So then, you hear, I was testifying at the Senate Aging Committee, and Rick Scott did this, tried to sound smart. And he's like, well, the worker dependency ratio, there used to be 2 workers for every retiree. And I'm like, yeah, and they didn't have computers. So yeah, a lot of things have changed. But what matters is productivity. Has productivity grown enough? And you're like, yes, in fact, 1 worker today can produce massively more than 1 worker in the 40s. So is it the worker dependency ratio? No. Is it that the politicians have just stolen the money? That's a big one that you hear all the time too. Well-meaning people really believe this one. And it speaks to a deeper cynicism. You're like, I understand why you believe that. Look around. But the truth is that what FDR did is he created this trust, which is a legal entity that they cannot get their hands on. If they could, I'm sure they would have stolen it. Right. But they can't, so they didn't. So it's not because they've stolen all the money. And then you get to, what is it? Here's the thing. Productivity of workers used to go up, and wages would go up at the exact same rate. This is what happened up until the 80s. And then wages stayed flat and productivity kept going up. But all of this went to the richest people in this country. The billionaires took all of the gains of the economy.
And they're not paying taxes on that extra income.
And they don't pay into Social Security on all of their income. They only pay in up to the cap, which right now is $176,000. And so the more money you make, the less as a percentage you pay into Social Security. Right. That's where the 30 years went to. So now we know what the problem is, a 17% benefit cut in 2035. We know why it exists, because the billionaires don't pay the same rate as the rest of us. So now, after all that, I'll answer your question. What is our solution to it? It's simple. It addresses the problem. Just have billionaires pay the same rate into the system, just like we do. And not only does the trust fund, the solvency, go out into the next century, we can expand benefits for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and we're probably going to have to wait a while for that to be the solution, because now the billionaires are the ones running every part of the government, it seems.
It's true, but, the billionaires are also, there is no Ubermensch. There is nobody who's like, oh man, this guy's a Bond villain. And you're like, no, he's not. He's a bumbling human being, surrounded by yes men and corrupted by power and money. Mainly, he's lucky. I'm talking about Elon Musk. He thinks everything he's doing is like the smartest thing in the world. This is overreach. And the American people are like, wait a minute. No, I don't want him in charge of my Medicare. No. I don't want the billionaires in charge of my Social Security. So my prediction is that, in fact, the mask off of who is in charge of the Republican Party is actually going to help people understand the us versus them, right? Because the Republican Party dancing to the tune of the billionaires, or all politicians dancing to the tune of the billionaires, they've historically lied about it, right? They're like, no, this is about efficiency. This is about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Like when they rip healthcare away from disabled Americans, they're usually like, this is for your benefit. But now, finally, they're like, nah, this is literally just because we're going to give the money to Elon Musk. We gave him the keys to the treasury. So I'm not trying to be a rose. People are going to get hurt. There will be people will get hungrier, sicker. They'll die because of what's going to happen. It's horrible. But through adversity, I do believe solidarity grows. And I do believe that as people see the simplicity of what's going on, it's either golden yachts, tax breaks for the billionaires, or I get my Social Security, my Medicare, and the things that I've earned were in my working life.
I mean, what you're saying also explains why billionaires spend so much time focused on buying votes, because Elon Musk at the end of the day only gets one vote for himself when he walks the ballot box. But to protect his interest, he's got to buy everybody else's vote by changing the discourse that's out there. And they're successful at it. That's what super PACs are, right?
They are really successful at it.
Yeah. Is Social Security a benefit or an entitlement?
So Social Security, it's the easiest thing to think of it as. And I think that this is sort of, there's these semantical arguments that like DC and generally if someone is like, define your terms, when you're like, stop hurting me, and they're like, define your terms, that person is part of the gang that's hurting you. So the easiest thing to think about Social Security as is your money. It's your money. You see it coming out of your paycheck into Social Security, and then it's there for you. A slightly more complicated answer is that it's an insurance product that you have earned.
Yes.
You pay premiums into an insurance product. What you're insuring are your wages. You're insuring the loss of wages due to a few things. One, old age retirement. Two, life-changing event that leads to becoming disabled and no longer being able to work. Or three, the death of a breadwinner of a family, the surviving children get benefits. But that's the insured thing, is your wages. So what Social Security is your money, or more complicated, it is, for the vast majority of Americans, the largest asset that they have. It is over $1 million in life and long-term disability insurance, plus an inflation-protected annuity if they retire.
What gave birth to your personal interest in this? I mean, Social Security, I can just tell how passionate you are about it. Where does it come from?
A couple places. So I actually moved to DC. This is a giant pill bottle that you see in my office. That's from a protest outside of pharma. I moved to DC after working in outreach HIV clinics in Chicago and here in DC. And, you know, my clients would be harmed or die. And my job, I was basically like the paperwork person. And there would be all these things that I'm like, this is stupid. This can't work. It's contradictory. Or, you know, now I know the term bureaucratic disentitlement, right? So I'm just like, this is impossible for my clients to do. It's literally impossible for my clients, who were some of the most complex, very difficult cases. And they're like, oh yeah, just go ahead and fill out this paperwork. And I'm like, they're not going to be able to. And so I was like, policy is, where does this come from? And people were like, Washington, D.C. And I'm like, I'm going to go there. And so I actually came to take on the pharmaceutical industry and to build something based on public health after I break apart the current system that just serves private interests. Mm-hmm. And then I meet through a bunch of the battles, Nancy Altman and Eric Kingston, who were starting an organization focused on protecting Social Security from a commission, these cuts to a commission. And they connected, I was connected to them because they're like, hey, Alex knows how to organize. Like, I'm an activist, so I build people power, but I also know how to do it digitally, right? So they're like, yeah, you don't know, there's this thing called the Netroots, and this is in 2009, 10 that I'm employee number one. But I also remember Social Security from my time in the clinic. So I actually didn't understand until I was the inheritor of a lot of the wisdom from Nancy Altman, who wrote the book on Social Security. But I understood its power because I had clients that we would go down to the Social Security office. And in the case of disability benefits, I saw with my own eyes, because of a worker at the office who was like, no, you do qualify. You qualify for these benefits. I don't know why somebody told you previously that you didn't. This client went from being homeless to being housed. Right? And I mean, it was a flip of a switch. And I was like, wow, I've never seen anything that powerful, that life-changing before, that like, bloop, bloop. And now this client is housed, which starts this incredible cascade of good effects, right? Now they're housed, so now they're going to stay on their meds. When they stay on their psych meds, they're able to meet their appointments. When they meet their appointment, right, it just goes boom, 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 boom. And I was like, I've never seen anything that has that power. Just flip of a switch.
So I'll tell you something. In my office, and to this day, I'm the only private disability law firm in the country that employs, people to do this. Several years ago, we started a position that's called client concierge. And it's because of exactly what you just said. So, we have someone in my office who, they're not case managers. They're not working on somebody's disability claim, helping them get benefits. They're trying to help them get food stamps. They're trying to help them do everything else in the hemisphere around them. Because when you're disabled, when you're applying for these benefits and you're not getting that check, going to the doctor, taking care of yourself, finding healthy food, it becomes like your treatment becomes priority number 10. And then we can't help them. So helping people sustain themselves through this terrible process. I mean, it takes years to get Social Security disability generally after somebody applies. I mean, on average, not for everybody, but on average, you're aware of that.
You want to hear a little anecdote on that?
Please.
Which is funny. Literally, I volunteered for a while and then it was my paid job. So like I had good experience on this. It was Social Security, like wasn't, the main focus, but it was definitely like, when we would go through with most of my clients had AIDS defining illnesses, which can qualify people for disability. So it was like in our checklist, go through and see if they're going to qualify for disability. I believed until like 1 year into working for Social Security Works, when I finally read it in Nancy's book, and I was like, wait, I thought everyone was denied the first time they applied. I've told so many people, not that on average, the way you did, very uncarefully, I was like, you apply, you get denied, then you have to appeal, and the process begins then. So you have to apply as quickly as possible because you're going to get denied. And it was only, that's how incredibly rigorous, and I think it's absolutely to a fault, our system is. I never saw a single person in either of the clinics that I worked with or at get through on the first go. And they had, it wasn't just me. I would actually bring them to a lawyer. The lawyer would help, right? Like, these are people who had help and not like you help. But, and still, I believe that that's how the system worked. Everyone got denied because it's so strenuous.
Is, in your belief, or do you have knowledge of the fact, is the system set up to make most people fail at the outset? Is that
Absolutely.
intentional?
It's bureaucratic disentitlement. So this is the part. And now, I got my master's in policy. I learned an enormous amount, and I'm always learning more. So I just used the story of me not knowing something. So now I'm trying to be like, but you can trust me on this, but also just Google it for yourself.
Establish credibility again, Alex. Establish credibility.
The thing that really blows people's minds because I talk about it really openly, because I think it's important for people to understand, is all of Social Security is actuarial tables, right? It's literally projections. And what the projections are about is wages and death. Right? You're like, that's what you're predicting.
Right.
And the death prediction is incredibly important. So like, why do people not get their Medicare for 2 years? Why is there this wait, right? And when I'm like, it's to kill people, and people are like, no, that can't, and you're like, it literally is to kill people. You can look at when they talk, it's because it saves money. And you're like, how? How does it save money? And you're like, it saves money because if you put a waiting period in right then, you're going to kill the people who are most costly, the people who need care the most. You're going to deny them that care, and then they're going to die. And then you can calculate that, and we put it in actuarial tables so that you don't have to look in the face the fact that what you're talking about is the reason that it's cheaper to do it this way is because we've killed a bunch of people, not people who didn't qualify. And you know this because this is right. This is what you do. It's very specifically. These are people who qualify for disability. And what that automatically means is that you get Medicare because we're like, yeah, well, that makes sense. If you're disabled and you can't work, you're going to need health care. But then someone was like, well, this is super expensive. How can we save money? And they're like, put in a waiting period. Just definitely don't call it kill the sickest people who need care, right? Like, because then people would be like, that sounds horrible. And you're like, now you're in policy land where half the battle for the people who are like more worried about protecting golden yachts than lives is coming up with very confusing language to obfuscate or to confuse people about what's going on. But that's what's going on. So is it set up to be difficult on purpose? Absolutely. There's a Fortune 500 company whose entire business model is states will hire this company and they go through their system and they're like, yeah, this is a little bit too streamlined. You're going to want to really put in some extra hurdles in there, and we'll save you this much money from people dropping off the Medicaid rolls or not enrolling in Medicaid. The policy term for that is bureaucratic disentitlement, which again, I don't even like saying those words because then it sounds like, oh, it's got a purpose. What it is you're taking healthcare away from people who qualify for it by making it hard for them to get it.
There's just so many different things, like so many thoughts that go through my head when I hear you talk about this. I mean, one thing that, are you familiar with the We Can't Wait legislation, which was brought last year? Is that something that you think makes sense to take away? And it wasn't for the Medicare, it was for the benefits or for cash money. But
so we don't like the We Can't Wait. We like expanding Social Security and then having billionaires pay in. Because the problem again is that the billionaires, because they've gotten all the income and they don't pay in above that cap, which, just to say for your listeners, $176,000, you pay in on all of your income. So the vast majority of Americans pay in on 100% of their income. But as soon as you hit $176,000, you don't pay a nickel into Social Security until the next year. So a person who makes $1 million a year, they stop paying in right around, it'll be between Valentine's Day and March 1st. So that's the problem. that's where the solution should be. And we generally don't like the piecemeal policies that can often pit people on Social Security against each other. We are much more into what is the problem? Billionaires aren't paying on all of their income. So the solution is have billionaires pay on all of their income. We've got legislation that does that. Social Security 2100 Act in the House, and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's bill in the Senate. And, we support a handful of other legislative approaches, but generally that's where we are.
How likely is it to see that legislation get passed where, all the tax cuts and breaks, but really just, the cap on where people are paying disappears?
So what historically has happened, and you can almost set your clock to this. What is the last minute that Congress can act before something happens? And that's exactly when they're going to do it, right? So what is the absolute extremis where they could act?
Right.
So 2035. In 2035, when the action forcing event is staring down all of these politicians and all of their constituents are like, what do you mean my benefits are going to be cut by 17%? If you don't fix this, I am going to vote you out of office, right? And it'll be a cacophony. And that's what happened in 1983. So my prediction is that there will be, there was a enormous Social Security bill passed last thing that happened last Congress, that
the Social Security Fairness Act.
Yeah, that President Biden signed into law, that got rid of some unfair policies that Reagan signed into law. I did not think that one was going to pass. I was wrong. It was like by the skin of its teeth, and like for the teachers, firefighters, and police officers that no longer face this unfair reduction of benefits. It's an enormous thing, and we're super proud of it. And the organizing that went into it, it's rolling into the organizing to expand benefits for everybody. So I'm just saying it is possible that little pieces can move, but generally there's no appetite from the Republicans to do anything on Social Security other than create a commission to cut benefits. What they want to do is raise the retirement age from 67 to 69 or 70, which is between a 14% and 21% benefit cut, which if you think about it, you remember before I said the problem is a 17% benefit cut in a decade. And so the Republican solution is just the problem today. That's the hustle that they're trying to pull, is they don't want the billionaires to have to pay the same rate as the rest of us. So they're going to try to convince you that Social Security is going bankrupt, meaning you're going to get nothing. And then they're going to be like, but if you vote for me, I'll get you 83 cents on the dollar. And you're like, wait, no, that's not a solution. That's the problem. But if you confuse people enough, they'll buy anything.
Are there specific politicians who you've seen campaigning that way, like spreading misinformation about Social Security?
Oh, yeah. Donald Trump we have his mailers. I don't know if I have any in the office. I brought him to the Hill. Marjorie Taylor Greene threw him in the air. So one, he lied about that he's the guy who's going to protect Social Security. He cut benefits when he was president in his first term. Continuing disability review is just cutting benefits.
One more question that's kind of on the line that we're going on, and I think a lot of people will be curious to hear what you think. What are the developing policies that you see happening in the next 4 years? What are you most scared of?
The destruction of Medicaid. So Medicaid, largest provider of long-term care in this country. It serves primarily seniors and children, people with disabilities, and it is a critical program for tens of millions of Americans. But the Republicans need something to offset the handouts to billionaires, which is what the whole game this year is about, that Trump tax cut. Excuse me. The whole game this year is about that Trump tax cut. So through budget reconciliation, they've teed up $2.3 trillion in Medicaid cuts, and that would destroy the program. And there is a lot of juice behind that push right now. So that's my number one worry. Number 1.5 worry is the creation of a commission, a fast track commission that Republican budget chair Jody Arrington has already passed out of committee. It's real. And what this commission could do is cut Social Security benefits outside of budget reconciliation in a fast track manner. And that is the commission. We've seen this time and time again. Wall Street demands their sacrifice in order to give tax handouts to themselves. They demand massive cuts to other things, right? And it's that simple. You steal grandma's Social Security, you steal children's health care so that you can give hundreds of millions of dollars to individual billionaires so that they can, plop it in an offshore account and do nothing with it. I mean, it's just the monstrosity of it is immense. So number one, destruction of Medicare through reconciliation. Number 1.5, the commission, fast track commission to destroy Social Security or to at least cut it by raising the retirement age.
Yeah. Well, before your computer runs out of juice, I just want to thank you so much for having me here in your office and for taking the time to talk to me. I'm sure there were so many things that you talked about that I'm excited to share with the world. So thank you, Alex Lawson, the Executive Director of Social Security Works.
Thank you for having me on, and hopefully I can come back on when my computer isn't running out of battery.
Part 2.
And I'm excited for these conversations.
Great. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for listening to the Triple D Podcast, Donuts, Disability, and Discourse. Rate, subscribe, and tune in next week for more discourse and donuts.